On today's video, I'm going to be talking about a topic I have never discussed on my channel before, and I've now done more than 400 videos. So for me to find a topic that I've never even touched is no mean feat. But today's topic is swearing. This is really the fascination for me because it's such a big part of our language. It's such a huge part of how many people communicate, express themselves, and it's really shaped by cultural and societal norms and expectations. And so I'm really interested in this, both from the voice and the communication perspective, but also the conditioning perspective, which is a big part of my work. So whether you're someone that swears a lot, whether you don't, it doesn't really matter. But this is a video really on looking at the impact that it has on how we communicate. So if that resonates with you, then please do stay tuned. Before I get going though, if you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Anuska Taylor. I'm an experienced voice coach and Jungian depth coach, and I help clients to have a profound transformation from within in how they communicate, how they express themselves, and ultimately helping them to free their voice so they can express themselves more authentically. So my whole philosophy is your voice is an outer expression of what's going on within. And so we have to do the inner work as well as the technical voice training work to truly be free and to truly transform our voice. So if you're ready for something deeper and you're over the quick tips, because there's a lot of quick tips out there in the communications voice space, then please do check out my links below. And I would love to help you with your voice. You can book a one-off 60-minute session through to my signature 8-month private voice coaching program, Speak with Impact. All the links are below. Don't hesitate to get in contact with me or leave a comment below. And if you enjoy my videos, please don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe if you have yet to subscribe to my channel. So before I get going, let me just give you a very brief history, very brief history of swear words. I actually studied etymology at university, and funnily enough, this topic never came up. But I find this very interesting because swear words are as old as the English language itself. And it's just the actual words that we use have changed. And that really, as I said at the start, comes down to our cultural and societal conditioning and what's been normalized for us in our particular culture. So I'm talking here specifically today about Western culture. This may not apply to you if you're from another culture, but I'm in the UK. And so what I have seen is really, it just feels like swear words are everywhere now. Like you cannot turn on anything, YouTube, TV, be out and about. It's just left, right, and center. So for me, like swearing has become more normalized, more commonplace, and more mainstream with very young people, really all ages, actually. This impulse to use the taboo language, which is really what swear words are, has never really changed. It's been around for centuries. And whether it's our need to have an emotional release, or whether it's to emphasize certain points or certain ideas we want to say, swear words have been around forever. So let me just give you a very quick, brief summary of this. So when we think back to medieval times, the most serious and common form of swearing was blasphemous. So it was religious in nature. And then we look to the Renaissance period and the Victorian era, and that's when we started to see a shift away from the sort of more religious driven swear words, the blasphemous swear words, through to probably what we now see more, which is words more towards sexuality and bodily functions. So then we come to our modern era, and we've really seen a decline in religious affiliation, certainly in Western culture. And so those words that, say, in medieval times would have been perceived to be very offensive, those religious sort of blasphemous words, are quite commonplace now. And certainly we hear lots of people say them. I say them. My parents used to say them, because if we're not really affiliated with a religion, then we don't even really see them as blasphemous. So things like bloody hell, for God's sake, damn you, we hear those all the time, and they're fairly innocuous by the standards of other words that we hear today. And so now the focus has moved more towards the scatological, and the sexual swear words. So the C word, for me, is probably the most offensive one. And I'm going to say it like that because I don't know whether YouTube will ban the video otherwise. But then obviously things like fuck and shit are very, very common. So what I'm really interested then is what's the impact of these swear words and how we communicate, and why indeed do we even use them? Because most people will use some kind of swear words in their day-to-day life. I'm not saying you'd go into a business meeting necessarily and use them, but in your day-to-day life, they will feature somewhere most likely. So the first idea is emotional expression. I said at the start that swear words are often used as an emotional release. So they become a very powerful way to express strong emotions. So if you think about the times when you might swear, it's probably one of two reasons. One, because you're really angry about something and you have a lot of rage and maybe hatred about something. So that sort of triggers those swear words. Often we don't even realize we're saying them, they just come out of our mouth. But also when we're going through a situation that's very physically painful. So if you stub your toe, or this is at the lesser extreme, through to maybe a woman giving birth at the more painful extreme, swearing is very common. And there's a reason for that because studies have shown that swearing actually temporarily increases our pain threshold. So there's a reason why we use them, which I found really fascinating when I was learning about this, because it isn't just random that we might swear when we stub our toe or put our finger on a hot stove accidentally. There is science behind why we choose those words in that moment. And it's very spontaneous. We're not consciously thinking about it. The words just come out. So it has both a cathartic function and is a powerful way for us to express strong emotions. So number two is social bonding, which I think for me is really interesting because we start to come into the conditioning aspects of why people swear or why people don't swear. So often when we swear, and I remember this very much, I grew up in a home where my parents were very anti-swearing, other than the religious swear words, which were considered a little bit more harmless. But in terms of anything else, never heard them in my home. But around my peers and at school, I heard everything. So when I was out in the pub or with my friends, then those words would start to appear. And I think this is very common because I wanted to fit in with my social group. And so this brings me on to the social bonding element. If you're around people that swear and use certain words all the time, you're probably going to do the same. But if you're around people that don't swear, you're probably not going to swear either. But in terms of using swear words, we're really letting people see perhaps the real us, the unfiltered version of us, the raw version of us. I'm letting you see me use this language. And it's almost allowing me to connect more with you, to build a greater bond, to build a greater rapport. So it's a way that we learn very early on. And as I said, for me at school, to actually build connections, to build relationships with people. So you hear this now, particularly amongst younger people in casual conversation, swear words are just littered in conversation, and they're often used sort of jokingly in that kind of jokey banter, to insult people as well. So it's very much part of the social bonding. Number three is emphasis, persuasion, and authority, which might sound a bit odd. When we use swear words, they're very emotionally charged and can add a lot of emphasis and intensity to what we're saying. So a well-placed expletive, particularly if we're not someone that swears very often, is incredibly powerful and will grab attention and convey the seriousness of a situation. Because these words are dangerous, they're physical, they're frank, and they're sensual. And people listen, people take notice. As I say, particularly when you don't use them very often, people will sit up and listen. They were like, whoa, okay, I need to listen to her or him. Finally, number four is humor. Because I find, and this is actually what gave me the idea for this video, I was watching some comedy at the weekend, and the comedy was literally littered with swear words. But well-placed swear words in a joke or a punchline do 100% add to the comedy value. So it's very much about the timing, it's very much about the word. And also, as I said, if you're not using them all the time, it can be very, very powerful. So we can see why we might use them. And I think most of us probably do to a greater or lesser extent. Certainly, if we are in a painful situation or we're shocked by something, the words just almost just come out of our mouth. So let's talk about now with this sort of increase of swearing and it's sort of very much mainstream and sort of normalized. So what does that then do for us when we do communicate? So we talked about some of the reasons why we might use them, but let's talk about, say, some of the negatives. So I've already kind of mentioned this, but the desensitization. So the more we swear, the more we hear swear words, the more they lose their power. So if someone is swearing constantly, every other word is a swear word. And I'm thinking off the top of my head of Liam Gallagher from Oasis. Almost every other word is a swear word. You become almost desensitized to them when you hear him speak because they've lost their power, because they're just everywhere in everything he says. Not only will they lose their emotional power, but they'll also use their cathartic power because you're saying them all the time. So if you do put your finger on a hot stove and you swear, you're not going to get the same cathartic response that you would do if you don't swear very often. So when we use them all the time, they almost become like filler words, like and ah. They lose their attention grabbing emphasis function. So that's the first thing. I think they lose their power, essentially. They lose that attention grabbing power. So number two is the more we use swear words, I would argue the less articulate and the less expressive we become. There's almost a laziness to our speech when every other word is a swear word. And we use swear words to describe any emotion, whether we're angry, whether we're sad, whether we're in love, whatever we're going through, we're filling it with swear words. So it's easier then to just throw swear words into a conversation than extend our vocabulary and maybe learn some new words. And so that might come across, particularly in a more professional setting, that you're less educated, you're less intelligent, or less emotionally mature. And then number three, I just want to talk about this as a defense mechanism. And this is where I'm going to invite you at the end to start to kind of really question your use of swear words, when you use them, how you use them, why you use them. Because we've already talked about the social bonding aspect to swearing, and I'm just as guilty as everyone else on this. Using swear words can become a socially acceptable way to express strong emotions. And what that does, though, is it stops us really feeling the emotion and integrating the emotion. Because almost when I'm swearing, I'm usually expressing that outwards, I'm projecting that onto someone or a situation. But then that means that I am not having to feel it. So it becomes a defense mechanism from our own challenging emotions. Now, interestingly, I've also seen this on the flip side. So not just with things like anger and rage and hatred, which are probably quite typical to use a lot of swear words around, but also the other side of the coin in terms of love and vulnerability. And a friend of mine, I'm not going to mention any names, I always remember this was a few years ago, quite a few years ago, and she always used to call her cat a shithead. And I remember talking to her about it because I was kind of quite shocked because I love cats and I'm like using all the gorgeous sweetie pie kind of words. And she would call her cat a shithead. And we talked about it because we had that kind of relationship. And she said, but that's how everyone in my family shows love. We call each other shitheads. And I just found that really, really fascinating. But then when we talked about it more and we started to explore it more, it became apparent that there was a real fear of expressing love, vulnerability. So, in a sense, calling people she loved shitheads might have seemed a bit jokey and a bit funny, but it was almost a bit of a defense mechanism from really allowing herself to go there and express real love and real passion. Not that she didn't feel it, but it wasn't safe to express. So I do think that when we use swear words a lot, it becomes a defense mechanism from feeling and really expressing in a more vulnerable way our emotions. And it becomes a very convenient way for the ego to discharge that emotion. So we don't have to look at it, we don't have to face it. So, what I'm going to invite you to do now is to think about your own relationship to swearing. Now, remember, this is not a video about judging yourself. There's no right or wrong. It is what it is. A lot of this will be how you've been conditioned, your social conditioning around this, your religious conditioning, your familial conditioning, the culture that you live in. Are you in a Western culture? Do you live in the UK? Then it's probably going to be more commonplace for you, for example. But I want you to start to examine that relationship you have to swear words, to swearing. Are there words that you would never say? Are there words that you might say? Does it come easy to you to swear, or is it very uncomfortable? Do you only swear like when you're in pain, for example? And then think about how that serves you when you are communicating, when you're communicating with friends, with family, at work. How does that use or not use of those words serve you? Does it help you to bond with people or make an impact? Or does it actually kind of distance you a little bit? Do you find it then, as I said, difficult to actually build close, intimate, vulnerable relationships with people? I often think as well that swear words and humor can be quite closely aligned because they're both ways, in some ways, and again, I'm not saying that either of them are wrong, but when they're overused, they're often ways of discharging emotion. Like, I'm uncomfortable with this, so I'm going to make a joke out of it. I'm going to laugh about it. I'm going to swear. It's just a way of discharging emotion. So just start to notice that in yourself. And again, growing up in the UK, humor is a big thing here, bantering, joking, messing around. And for me, for a long time, using humor was a way of coping with uncomfortable emotions. So, but I do think a lot of people use swear words in a similar way. And then think about, do you swear or not swear to conform? So, like I said at the start, often we swear or we don't swear and we use certain words or don't use certain words because everyone around us is using them. So if everyone around you is saying a certain word, you're probably going to use it yourself. If no one's swearing, you probably won't swear. But just start to notice, am I using swearing to conform, to fit in, to be part of a group? And does that sit right with me? Is this actually what I want to be doing? Or am I doing it because I fear that if I don't do this, people won't like me or they'll think I'm boring or whatever? You might also be the other side of the coin, that you're a bit of a rebel and you actually like getting a rise out of others and actually shocking people and triggering people in a way. And so using swear words around people that perhaps are a little bit more prudish towards them, that might you might find that quite fun and enjoyable. So just start to notice, what is your relationship like with swearing? Where do you use it? Where you don't use it? Do you use it to conform or not conform? And are you using it to avoid feeling or facing your own emotions? And then how does it impact your voice as well? Because as I said also earlier, that there's a physicality to swearing. There's a rawness, there's a physicality, there's a dangerous element, really, because it is still taboo, even though it's still, even though it's quite common, it is still very taboo, generally speaking, some words more than others. So there is still an element of danger there. So it does have an impact on our voice. There's usually a lot more energy, a lot more power, a lot more intensity in our voice when we use those words. So I hope you found this video interesting. I'd love to know your comments, what your thoughts are. Have you ever thought about this before? And I'd love to know what your relationship is like to swearing. And let me know in the comments, because this is a new topic for me. I don't think I've seen anyone else talk about it. So I'd love to know your thoughts. But until next week, I will see you on my next video.